It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Well, my friends, let's sit back and have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee, drink some water, whatever your favorite beverage of choice is, whether we're driving to work, whether we're sitting and looking at the mess and wondering how we're going to get started, whether we're folding laundry, doing dishes, cleaning the Airbnb. Let's do it together today. October is here, and it's a big month. I've been warning about it for over a year, and we've already started to see the incoming energy as we ended September. By the way, the storm wasn't an October prediction. It was a September prediction. There's more on the way, and we'll talk about that. Not to overwhelm you. I also end the podcast on an uplifting note. Okay, we're talking about how we hold on to hope in the midst of chaos. I talked about the Jenga tower, and this is the month we see it begin to topple. Massive systemic change is at hand. Everything we know as normal is starting to change. And a lot of that is due to climate change. We'll see a lot of things political. And I talk about that too. We could see a change in candidacy in the Republican Party. But it doesn't mean J.D. Vance is going to be it. I don't give a name yet. I'm waiting for Matilda to do that, because it was her that made that, and I double-checked the astrology. That's one of the ways we work together sometimes. But she's entirely possibly right. It's not always fun to be right. When it comes to politics, it feels pretty good. When it comes to natural disasters, not so much. I usually prefer to be wrong. But the latest storm, Helene, makes me know that I'm probably dead center right for the rest of October. I don't think it was early. I think it is the beginning. And not just in the United States. You have to remember there's storms happening throughout the world. And since there's people from 76 countries plus that listen to the podcast here, I want you to keep an eye on your own weather. It will be volatile. We will see historic flooding events in October of 2024. But we are not without hope. And that's something I want to remind you about. I want you to check out the show notes. I've got some information there that you might find useful. I've got a coaching program starting in October, all about using your own astrology chart to find your security. I call it Heal the Money Wound, but it's so much more than money. It's how you find your value, your self-worth, how you build a strong foundation and find your resiliency. But we use the word money because that's what everybody's been taught to focus on. It'll be 6 weeks, and I'll be giving you actionable information that you can use on a weekly basis to make progress in making yourself more secure emotionally, psychologically, and physically. You can check those links out. If you're a patron, make sure you wait until I get you your discount codes. Speaking of patrons, big thank yous to our patrons for sponsoring the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. Because of you, there is this podcast. So we give our shout outs. You can scroll past and use the fast forward button if you insist, or you can leave a comment on Spotify and thank a patron. Because of them, you get weekly information you can take action on. And this week, you're going to hear as well some comments from people who heeded the warnings I've been giving either in social media, on the podcast, or through readings with me, and how they ended up prepared for Helene and how they've fared through it. So it's an action-packed episode. And I hope the end helps you get through a really wild October. Let's get going. It doesn't get easier, making predictions about natural events and seeing them unfold in real time. Because when we look at an astrology chart, what we're doing is looking at each symbol and its relationship to other symbols and understanding that there are 100,000 different possibilities for each symbol and finding the right combination based on historical collection of evidence, right? So many astrologers have observed the weather, seismic activity, political events over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And we know the meanings, And of course, I'm referring to Hurricane Helene and the devastating amount of water that fell in the southeast into eastern Tennessee, in the Virginias. And I spent a year warning end of September through October, we'd see an incredible amount of storms. I'm afraid there's more to come. And I am grateful to those of you who have checked in, who have let me know that you're okay, even if it's very uncomfortable where you are and you're dealing with an immense amount of devastation in your communities. And okay is a relative term. It's a weak word, but you have enough to get you through for a little while. That's good to know. In fact, I was feeling wrecked, wondering if I'd given enough warnings. I have a sizable audience. I'm what they call a mid-tier creator, which is great. I can reach a lot of people, but not as many as I could if I had more people. And I'm like, man, should I have been doing more popular things and less insistent on being my authentic self? Should I have warned stronger? Have I held back because I hate getting called a fearmonger? And then wondering, did I give enough locational information to help people prepare that do listen here on the podcast, on the TikTok, in my Patreon? I put up a public post about October, and I'm going to emphasize it here. The East Coast needs to be really ready. And when I say east, I mean east of Chicago, from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico. East. And yeah, Texas on the coast, you might want to keep your eye out for a few things. And of course that includes the Midwest. Okay. If I say from north to south, that's a big area. Okay. And I'm really not familiar with East Coast geography other than the political geography, where the states are. I'm not familiar with your rivers, your creeks, your mountain range. I'm from the West Coast. My family left the East Coast in the 1700s. Okay. So I am not familiar with it. West Coast stuff, I can give you a whole lot of information because I've driven almost every inch of the West Coast up into Idaho and Montana and down into Wyoming through Utah into the Southwest. I've done that, but most of my experience is west of the Rockies. So I worried about that, but I got some good news and I wanted to share that with you. I wanted to read some of the comments that warmed my heart and let me know I did what I could do as a forecasting astrologer. I get a lot of heat in social media because people be like, well, this astrologer makes us feel good. I'm like, well, that's great. I hope I make people feel good on occasion as well. But my job is to forewarn you, to forearm you, because life doesn't arrange itself for us. And may I emphasize that there are places impacted by Hurricane Helene, where you could have prepared all you wanted and bad things still could have happened. And that's something I've been saying all year. You can only prepare for what you can prepare for. Life doesn't come in tidy boxes. It isn't sterile. It isn't perfect. Being human is gritty and messy sometimes. And sometimes it's painful. Doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong spiritually. Doesn't mean God is punishing you. That's all a bunch of bullshit. Things happen for no good reason sometimes. Sometimes we are the victims of circumstance. How we meet that, if we can meet that when we survive it, is up to us. That's our free will. But free will isn't choosing a life of trauma. Free will isn't choosing a life with nurturing parents. That is circumstance. And I'm really tired of what people consider the spiritual community, because I don't. Full of people who say, well, you used your free will to choose this bad situation. It's bullshit. We are not here to be taught lessons by the universe. We are here to have a range of experiences. Some of them are unpleasant. Some of them are pleasant. Okay? Period. Anybody claiming anything else has an agenda. And I say this just because I know this has happened in the Bible Belt, and there are going to be people who think God is punishing them and their families and their community, and they're going to start to blame witches and astrologers. But I wanted to give you some of the messages I got that gave me a little bit of relief, because I always wonder, have I done enough? Because I'm okay if a prediction doesn't come true, by the way. Like the big earthquake I thought might happen in California. I thought maybe between a 6.5 and a 7 might happen in California in September. It didn't. Thank God. Like we want that shit to happen. No, we don't. There was a 6.5 at that same time period up in British Columbia. And it didn't impact anybody. So it wasn't big news. So, all right, back to the drawing board on figuring out directions for the earthquakes. Those are very, very hard to pinpoint. So if people were prepared and it didn't happen, guess what? You're prepared in case something else happens that I haven't seen in the charts. Great. I'm not going to see everything. It's impossible. I got the magnitude right, though. So I seem to be doing better with magnitudes than I am directions on earthquakes. But, geologists can't pinpoint them. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. But let's talk about these beautiful messages that I have received that have warmed my heart, because it lets me know I've stayed steady and on track. And Asheville had been very much in my mind, because I was like, had I mentioned it very much? Now, I know I mentioned the Carolinas. I know anytime people ask me about Tennessee, I was like, yeah. But remember, again, pinpointing locations, and obviously had warned Florida, But I got this message today in my TikTok comments from Emily. After listening to your wisdom, I informed my sister in Asheville to prepare herself. She stocked up on water, food, solar charges, and can ride the chaos out for a bit. Thank goodness she is safe. Man, that's pretty cool. Thank you, Emily. I appreciate that note more than you know, because I've been sick just thinking about people and what they're going through. I've been getting check-ins in the Patreon from our members in the Southeast. This one from Patricia. We finally got power and internet and cell service in South Georgia. Boy, it was hard temps. We're up inside the house So it was really hot inside and out, but we made it. So grateful. Jamie said, I'm in North Augusta, South Carolina. Our area is devastated by the Hurricane Helene. But I wanted to thank Laurie so much for the predictions and information she puts out regularly. Because of you, my local family and friends are a bit more comfortable than we would be otherwise if we weren't so prepared. The only reason we were prepared was because of the predictions. Our area was only supposed to see a tropical depression from the hurricane. It's what we typically expect. But we got hit when she was still a Category 1 and the dirty side of the storm. Wow. So this is why I do it, guys. I had a message from Janine, and you gave me a year ahead reading last year and told me this time of year we would see a huge storm in Florida. I was prepared and spent the year doing extra things like nailing my roof, purchasing large batteries for my solar. I'm good, and I didn't have any issues. My husband even spent the time thanking me for insisting we do extra prep for this hurricane season. Thank you for being a good guide and providing your services. I remember that reading when you said, I don't know how he's going to feel about it. And I'm like, well, you might want to put some pressure on him. So, Becca Lynn is also a patron. Laurie, thank you so much for your energy and recommendations to prepare. This gave me the opportunity to have conversations with my oldest two for preparation and not panic. We have 3 plans in place if they need them. I've learned so much from you in the last 9 months. I'm thankful that you came across my feed. Well, I'm thankful you're here. Andrea, Florida here. We came out of Helene okay, prepping for the next one. They are watching the Caribbean as more is coming, and it is. There's more coming, guys, so stay ready. And then I had one more I saved as a screenshot because it's hard to keep up with all the comments. Tressie said, I'm in St. Pete. That got a lot of damage. I was prepared thanks to you. So much lost here, but the community can rebuild. We did not get damage at our home. Ben telling husband who did not believe in astrology, I can now say he's starting to believe. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for letting me know you're okay, because, I don't think you guys realize this. I may not remember every reading, because I do a lot of readings, but I think about everybody who comes through. And I think about my patrons, and I think about the people who listen to the podcast, whether I know you or not, whether you've ever made a comment or not. It floors me that so many people who don't know me listen. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking a lot about what's coming up in October. I've already done that for patrons. You got the inside scoop. Normally I don't give the full month ahead quite, so early, but this is the most intense month of 2024. And it isn't just intense weather-wise. Okay. There's a lot coming. This is the big cosmic tsunami. It's massive. Do I mean a real tsunami? No. I am talking about massive amounts of energy. This is where the Jenga tower begins to topple. And it's the month I've been trying to get people ready for well over a year. And I'm afraid we're going to see a lot come at us. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about how we manage our mental health through this. Okay. It's really, really important. I'm going to talk about how to use the energy of that new moon. Okay. In this episode. Super important. I'm going to talk about how we get through these intense times. And as always, I'm going to be giving you week to week information about how to manage through. Now, if you're a patron, I did a grounding meditation to help you wash the energy through. So if you're overstimulated or blocked, The grounding meditation is in the Patron Resources collection. And you can either use it to fall asleep or you can use it to start your day. People have been using it both ways and having great results. Okay? We're really going to need it. This is not the month to shrink away from standing up for yourself. This is not the month to allow yourself to become so overwhelmed by life and circumstances that you can't take action, and it will be tempting. Okay? This is the month you find your power. And power doesn't always mean it's brute strength. Sometimes it's just getting up and getting out of bed and taking one more day at a time. Okay? We're going to have a lot going on politically. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about the debate and what I think is going to happen in the debate. I already talked about that in my Patreon. We're going to talk about what I think is going to happen with world leaders. And I'll give deeper dives when it comes to politicians in the Patreon-only podcast. But I want you to understand we've got more storms. And climate change is the biggest thing we've got on our plates. The biggest thing. We are going to have to meet it head on. And I've been warning about this for multiple years, that as we move towards 2025, things get more and more severe. It shouldn't be a surprise that things are going to get more severe. Scientists have been warning about this my entire lifetime, not just 30 years, not just 40 years. They've been warning since the 70s, maybe the late 60s. Some were smart enough to see it in the 1800s, right? And it's hard to manage when there's not a lot you can do about it, other than do the best you can. There isn't going to be a lot of the globe untouched by climate change to some degree or another, whether it is more fires, whether it is more flooding, whether it is supply chain breaks. Speaking of, we'll talk about the potentials of the strikes, especially the longshoremen in the United States on the East Coast, all through the South, including, I believe, parts of, Texas ports. It's an intense month. And so we're going to give a rundown. The Awake Space Astrology magazine will come out by the end of the week. I'm still working on it. Patrons will get their horoscopes, by the 2nd. I'm hoping to have those mostly done. My predictions have been out for quite some time. It's a stressful month. And we may be wondering if we all have whiplash by the end of it. Okay. Because things are going to come out of left field. They're going to come out of center field. They're going to come out of right field. They're going to be swinging right over our heads and between our eyes. There's just a lot that's going on. And we are already very sensitized to disaster because of the way the news cycle just goes on to the next thing. But I want to remind you, Maui isn't rebuilt. The areas that were impacted. It takes an inordinate amount of time and resources to rebuild immense amount of infrastructure damage, and we have even more on the way. This is the beginning. Now, am I saying it's just for that region? No. So, next couple segments, we'll be going over things. I'm going to try to lead you through and leave you with some hope, because I will say you will see the best of humanity. You will. But the people who will fare the best are the people who understand that life isn't all about them, that there are other people in this world. The people who are able to join together to support one another, they do the best as we move forward as a collective. The people who are more worried about their damn vacation or their second home or their, consumer habits, like, am I going to get my delivery of Christmas presents or whatever? They're not going to do so well as we go forward. So it's really, really important that we start to cultivate an idea that there is a world outside of our inner self, while cultivating our inner self to be resilient. That's why I have the mystery school curriculum. It helps you get clear about you, what your needs are. Okay. So sometimes when I'm speaking, you're going to think I'm contradicting myself this episode. Because on one hand, I'm going to say some people need to realize the world doesn't revolve around them. And on the other hand, I'm going to say you need to stop thinking about what everybody else thinks and start thinking about how you can align into your making sure your needs are met. But there's a big difference between only worrying about your vacay or what brand of shoes you're wearing, which are all very superficial, and not sacrificing your well-being for ungrateful and unappreciated people. Okay. Big difference. You don't need to sacrifice yourself on an altar of social acceptability. Okay. So we're going to be talking about that. So what are we covering? New moon. Some political stuff in another segment. And then how to manage through this. So I'm going to leave you with the how to manage through and how to hold your consciousness steady through all of this. Techniques for dealing with the immense amount of heartache that we can see with natural disasters. And of course, I'll give the weather, and what I see coming and do how to best prepare yourself. My answer doesn't change a whole lot. Okay. But, yeah. So, heart is heavy because I hate to watch people suffer. I hate to see the devastation to a beautiful landscape. And just knowing what goes on after flooding and just it's horrendous. And yet we got more to come. So my job is to prepare you. If you're listening to this and you're still impacted by everything and you're a patron, and you haven't had a chance to check in, I completely get it. Don't think I'm not thinking of you. And this is a very special message for Miss Charlotte. She's a very special patron. She's been with us since she was an infant, and she's a big girl now and a big sister. And Miss Charlotte, I'm so glad you're okay. I'm so glad your mama's okay. And Miss Laurie loves you. So, alrighty. When her mama Alicia reached out to let us know they were all right, I was so relieved because I was so worried. So, it's always good to know. Don't think I don't care. No matter how big we get, I care. That's sometimes I care too much. But I am grateful to each and every one of you for, and we had a lot more check-ins. Those are just the ones I grabbed. To all of you who have been in the path of the storms, and all of you who may be in the path of the storms, and we'll talk about that next. I think we're going to talk about the weather in the next segment. Do not think for a heartbeat that my heart has not been with you, because it is. And I am so glad you're okay. If you are. And if you're not okay, I'm sending you lots of healing, lots of energy. And we've got a couple reputable GoFundMes up in the Pluto and Aquarius chat for the Awake Space Patreon. These are given to me by people I know who have connection with these groups that are doing good things in community. If a patron knows of them, just do me a DM in the Patreon and tell me about the GoFundMe and how you know the person. I need there to be a personal connection for direct donations. I prefer direct donations than to like the Red Cross, etc., because I want to make sure they go directly to the people impacted. So there's that. All right, let's get going. Let's talk about the weather in the next segment. All right, so we've got a lot of intensity with the weather in October, and partly that is because Mars is in Cancer, and that's aggressive water, if we're going to do a direct translation. And it's in a trine with Saturn in Pisces, which is retrograde. And that trine is unrestricted energy. And I know everybody thinks trines are all good. They're the great benefic aspect, but they're not. Not when it comes to mundane astrology. It shows an immense amount of water that goes unstopped because we got Saturn retrograde. So when I looked at that, I saw dam failures, levee failures, immense amount of flooding. And that continues into October as Mars is remaining in that very easy connection with Saturn. It's just an immense amount of water. And if you follow the Real Medium Matilda on TikTok, or you listen to the Sassy Seers podcast that she and I make, we've been warning about walls of water for like the whole of 2024 when it comes to October. She's a psychic medium. She picked up on the same things that I'm seeing in the charts. Our modalities are very, very different. We work very collectively together. It's October is an intense month for weather. If you're a patron, then you will know that we have the 2024 year ahead in the shop, and you get it as part of your membership in it for free. It's what you get. I open up that recording mid-year to patrons. Okay. So people who want it in advance, they get it when they sign up for the event, that's a paid event. But about mid-year, I open it up as a benefit. And we've got a lot happening in October. We start off with the new moon in Libra. And that new moon is squaring off with Cancer. I think weather could hit on the 3rd, 4th, 5th of October and be very, very big weather. So we're looking at more storms. This is in the Caribbean. Okay. And it came to my attention because people tag me in such things because, I'm not watching weather reports. But there's 3 storms forming. When I look out at just October 5th, because I think the 4th and 5th are going to be really wet. We're actually looking at the moon in Scorpio conjunct Venus. That's attracting water. That's pulling water in. It's in a trine with Pluto it's in a trine with Saturn in Pisces and in a trine with Mars in Cancer. So I'm going to say from the 3rd through the 5th, we're looking at devastating amounts of water, big tides, but probably storm surges, breaches of levees. And when I look at, let's see, this is like 4 p.m. Pacific on the 5th. If I pull this back a few hours, I never have my charts ready. When I'm looking at about noontime Pacific, actually there's something that looks like it's happening. Yeah, it's the east, southeast. It's very, very, we can see tornadoes with this, water spouts, lots of infrastructure damage. And pooling water. I'm thinking this one might lean a little more like there's intensity to this. And we have Mercury starting to make a trine with Jupiter. So there's big winds with this. These are those big storms I was worried about. I think you're going to see levees, and New Orleans might want to watch out. Alabama, parts of Florida. if you're in the Caribbean, just be very, very aware of this is just so much water. This also, it might blow in and then cycle. Jupiter stations retrograde on the 9th. This might slow down the speed of storms, but that means they're going to cycle over the top and dump a lot more water. The 11th of October, we have Pluto direct. This is going to be a really, really big day. I think we're going to see a lot happen on the 11th and 12th because Pluto doesn't go direct till evening. And it's going to pack a wallop. I think that's going to hit more as far as like we're looking more at Eastern Europe, Western and Eastern Europe, the Levant, parts of North Africa. And I'll look into that in more detail in next week's podcast. But we're certainly going to see a lot of political things happen as well when it comes to war, when it comes to world leaders. We could see the death of leaders. We could see the deposing of leaders. We could see a lot of destruction as well. And it's kind of beginning the toppling of the Jenga tower. There's no artifice or illusion with any of this. It's just looking straight at it and going, wow, that's a lot. We've got Mercury square Pluto on the 13th. This could be, again, big air accidents, but it could also be weather related. Mercury moves into Scorpio that day, and the sun will be trine Jupiter. It's a lot of energy. Okay, it's a lot of energy. Again, I'll go through all of this week by week. Okay, I don't like to overload you guys too much. If you want the October rundown, you can check it out in the Patreon. I gave a clip of it in here on Spotify. It's a video podcast, so if you want to check it out on Spotify, I mean, I know we're on Apple and what have you, but we're getting more Spotify followers, which is interesting. It's always interesting to see where the listens are happening, but now over half of our listeners are listening on Spotify. So this is what I wrote in the notes for October 2024 back in June of 2023. October 11th is a huge day with Pluto stationing direct in Capricorn. We could see a leader wrest control of a situation or people. There are big oppressive vibes. Leaders could fall or governments fail. We could see a shakeup in government. We could see issues with weather and technology. So any kind of coalition government might have a hard time succeeding. This is global. Okay. We could see issues with the House or the Senate in the United States. I think we could see an elder statesman or two have health problems, and that could be Trump, it could be Biden, it could be both. October isn't great for either one of them. Okay. And like I said in the past, Kamala Harris is under a great deal of pressure in October. And it could be that it has something to do with Biden. So we're keeping our eyes open for that. I said whistleblowers are blowing and whistling, and it is loud. So we're going to hear a lot about that. There is a lot of violence in mid to late October. This could also be weather, as Mars in Cancer is in an approaching opposition to Pluto in Capricorn. This is the last hurrah. Expect draconian measures and harsh penalties. Nationalism and authoritarianism are going to come out in all corners. Expect things to not go well for Israel in any expanded regional conflict. So even if they're bombing works of other countries, international courts, international organizations, and coalitions are going to start moving to counter it. So long term, this topples not just that government, but the national integrity of that nation state, okay, of that recognized state. It really threatens that. The national security is at stake. And that's how you talk about that in political analysis terms. We can expect extreme weather, flooding, strong winds, hail, tornadoes. And when I'm talking hail, I mean like damaging hail, tornadoes, waterspouts, and hurricanes. Some of the places I'm concerned about in late October, and we'll talk about this week to week, guys, so just remember, is the Northeast. I have seen, as did Matilda, 3 storms. One coming down from the north, meeting something coming up from the south, and a potential nor'easter or like very strong storm slamming into New Jersey and New York. Okay. So something maybe a little bit like Hurricane Sandy in its strength. Is it a hurricane? I can't tell you that. Okay. But it's big water. Okay. And I've read in enough client charts that there's an extreme amount of water going to hit the Northeast, and to be ready for that. So you want to have your supplies. You want to have potable water on hand. When you have flooding, it really screws with the water supply. Okay. So you want to have potable water stored. You want to have everything up off floors. You want to have basements cleared. Be really, really ready for big weather. It's Chicago East, north to south, from Canada down to the Gulf Coast, all the way east. Does that include the Midwest? Of course it does. Okay. Be ready for what kind of weather comes into you. What happened with Ohio? They had tornadoes. Think about that. Tornadoes, hail. Even if you didn't used to get tornadoes, you might see them in those areas like the upper Midwest, maybe Michigan, even parts of Minnesota. We're going to see natural disasters at an unprecedented level. And I want to remind you that the House of Representatives did not put in emergency management funds into the stopgap measure. So trying to support our own country is going to be very, very difficult, because the House of Representatives is being controlled by the Freedom Caucus. Is like how they could even say they're pro-life at this point, I don't know, because they're not doing anything to support life. So extreme weather. If you live, even the mountain states might have the weather turn in October and see snow a little early. We could see temperatures dip pretty hard and start having freezing temperatures as we move towards the end of October. Halloween is a very volatile time, guys. So the week of Halloween leading up to it, we're going to see maybe some big storms with lots of infrastructure damage, lots of bridges, dams, buildings have issues. So I want you to do your best to prepare. Okay. It's going to be hard. We're going to see a lot of suffering. No, the major news outlets aren't covering it. The major news outlets have never covered weather well on the ground ever. Okay. They give a little blip. They make it sensational to get the views, but they don't cover, anything other than a well-known spot. Having lived through my fair share of bad weather in different places, that never got mentioned. I completely get the frustration. But we'll talk a little bit about how to prepare emotionally and physically for potential disasters in the next segment after we do some patron shout outs. We've got a bunch of new patrons this week. And if you're one of those, I want to thank you for being a patron. I love the comments on Spotify. It's a new feature, and we had a bunch of people thanking patrons. So I'll read those out as we move through the podcast. I think it's very cool, and I think our patrons deserve a lot of thank yous, because without them, there is no podcast. And we are 100% listener supported. And after getting all those messages and check-ins of people being okay and having been prepared and ready, Well, that's why we do it, right? And so, patrons, you deserve a thank you for supporting the podcast that gets out to so many people and helps people get ready for whatever is coming. So, let's do that and focus on some good stuff. All right, you heard the music. It's time for some patron shout-outs. Every single week, I give shout-outs to our newest patrons. Thank you to those of you who listen all the way through. So, here is our newest patrons. Midas, Belinda, Kim, Jacqueline, Luca, Mandy, Sandra, Barbara, Christina, Melanie, Kate, May, Cindy, Sarah, Robin, T-Bugby, Coco, City, Aaron, Jenny, Emerson, Andrea, Ellen, Sonia, Wanda, Dana, Elise, Sweet 75, California, I think, or Canada, Sweet 75, CA. Let's see. T. Delaney, T. Reed, Brian, Dr. Rajanil, sorry about that. Becky, Madison, oh, come on. Lindsay, Beatrice, Charles, Jazifa, Charlie, Julie, Emerald Light, H, Jackie, Elizabeth, Sean, Heather, Mandy, Shale, Kimberly, Audrey, Denise, Liz, Shani and Matt, Eat Soccer, Smokey Whaley, Darcy, Brandy, Kahane 777, Katrina, Lauren, Mariella, Jay, Dar, Catherine, Destiny, Blair, Sarah, Granny Shani, Jeannie, Tara, Jan, Francesca, Bookslut, Carolyn, Bovary, Maria, Amor, Brooke, Kim, Islas, Barbara, Dana, Jessica, Jen, Ms. HLP, Laura, Mandy, Brenda, Cindy, Taya, Daughter of Mars 222, Amber, Alex, Heather, Amber, Misbehaving, ER, Jennifer, Aisling, Sky, Meredith, Abby, Lorianne, Mindy, Carla, Nikki, Aaron, EG, Neka, Amanda, Shauna, Aaron, Catherine, Carolyn, Trista, Eora, Andrea, Jenny, Ashley, Cheryl, Megan, Emmanuel, Diane, Laura, L, Peach Blossom, Jillian, Mariah, Lisa B, Samantha, Tina, Kimberly, Patrina, Lori, Soledad, Adriana, E.I., Robin, Kristen, Tabitha, Lemon Biscuit, Megan, Brittany, Abigail, Cassandra, C.W., Lauren, Meredith, Elizabeth, Courtney, Christy, Jacqueline, Isaac, Kaylin, Joy, Loretta, Letha, Kay, Mamasaurus, Christina, and Fiona. Thank you guys for being the newest patrons. That's really exciting. Stay tuned. There's all sorts of good stuff coming up. I've got not much spots left in my reading calendar, and I'm not opening it up to more. I have my own transits this month that I gotta swim through on that cosmic tide. However, we are looking at doing some coaching programs where I'm going to show you how to use what is in your birth chart to your advantage. So I'm going to give you information to help you rise to the highest point of your possibilities and capabilities and potential as you can from my experience as an astrologer. And so we're looking at healing the money wound. And instead of focusing on the wound, we're going to focus on the healing, give you real life strategies. And that starts October 16th. If you're a patron, stay tuned for your special discount depending on the tier you're in. Alrighty. So, why don't we talk about some politics and some schadenfreude we have perhaps on the horizon. Well, we've got a new moon, which is a partial solar eclipse happening on October 2nd. So we start October out with some pretty interesting happenings because this one is in a square with Mars. It's an approaching square. And that will be going on during the debate, actually, between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. And I talked about what I think is going to happen there in a lot more depth than I'm going to here. I think my only concern is that J.D. Vance is a sneaky sneak, and I think Tim Walz is quite prepared for him to be a sneaky sneak. But I think Walz might get accused of being mean, even if it's well-deserved. So we'll see if it does any damage. Because it depends on the media spin. But I think the media spin might be like, oh man, he was too rough on that poor little dumb guy. We'll see. But that new moon sets up some interesting things. And I did a TikTok video using Stevie Nicks' new song, Lighthouse, which is a powerful women's anthem. And I thought, oh, she knows what she's doing. Because it is time for women to step up into their power. I've been telling you guys this for a long time. And this new moon being squared with Mars is not a time to restrict your power. And if you're listening to so-called spiritual creators who are all about the divine feminine being soft, I'm going to say they're selling you some patriarchy. Okay. There is nothing soft, as in weak, with being a woman. Okay. Femininity, divine or otherwise, is powerful. People don't try to oppress people they're not afraid of. And I've been saying for a long time with Pluto in Capricorn and Mars in Cancer for years that it's about time women proved them right and said, okay, you're afraid of us, here's why. And I think we're going to see some of that happening. I think we need to do more than yell. Finding your voice isn't about screaming into the void. It can be part of it. But it is definitely about showing up and just taking action. I was floored. Now, granted, I'm a West Coastie. My family's been on the West Coast on one side of my family since the 1700s because they were Spanish. And on the other side, since the early 1800s, like the 1830s, 40s, something like that. And growing up in the Northwest, defined gender roles weren't a thing. People did what needed doing to get it done. So if wood needed chopping and somebody was working, the guy of the house was working, the woman went out and chopped some wood. Got the kindling ready, got the fireplace ready. And if you needed to eat, somebody went fishing or hunting. And granted, that was starting to change in my childhood, but I knew as many women who hunted and fished as I did men, because it was just what you did. So I was very startled when I found out that women actually vote the way their husbands want them to. Because I don't come from that kind of family. So I can't fathom my grandfather trying to tell my grandmother how to vote. I just can't even picture it. But my grandfather's mother was a suffragette. So that probably had some bearing on it. So I come from a long line of progressive weirdos. So, by the way, your vote's private. And if you're voting against your interests because you're afraid of what your husband thinks, that's a sad, sad thing. I'm not just talking about access to abortion. I'm talking about access to health care. And if they take away one right, they're going to take away others. Okay. What does this have to do with spirituality? Everything. Because being submissive is not part of being a woman. Okay. It's not natural. It's not biological, and everybody is going to behave differently. I'm not saying go out there swinging with baseball bats, but saying, yes, dear, we do that when we don't have power. We will use emotional manipulation, all those feminine wiles that people accuse us of doing, because we had out of balance power dynamics. Now we've got a new moon in Libra. Libra is always about striking the balance, finding the balance. When you're working with old-fashioned scales, okay, Libra, you have to find the balance point. It isn't automatically balanced. Everything is always imbalanced, and Libra energy is learning to right the scale, make it balanced. Okay? Partnership is about mutuality and fairness. Alliances need to be mutual. 7th house is alliances. It's only marriage because it's a freaking contract. Love marriage did not even exist in culture until the 19th century. It didn't mean that some alliances and marriages were not loving. But this whole idea of love as the basis for a marriage was not it. It was financial. It was a business deal. It was a contract. Okay. And people who couldn't afford to do it didn't do it. Period. Taxes were involved, inheritance laws, all the 8th house stuff. And so with this new moon in Libra squaring off with Mars in Cancer, I think it's time to shed your internal patriarchy. That idea of having to compete with other women. That idea of not raising each other up, not allowing access, thinking that we have a place we need to stay in and that we can't move about the world freely. If you want to know how to set your intentions with this new moon, then September's Awake Space Astrology magazine has the new moon intentions for October. Okay. So, because I knew I wasn't getting out. So, October's magazine is going to have the intention setting guide for November, because November 1st, we have a new moon. There's no way in hell that magazine's coming out on the 1st. So, just like this week, it'll come out, 3rd or 4th. You'll hear about your, what I've been doing lately is if the magazine itself isn't done, you get your horoscopes, you get your predictions up. So I'll have the what's in the headlines up for you. I'll have the, all of that's in process, but the articles take me a while, and I don't want to rush my beautiful editor because she's amazing and she loves me. And there we go. Did I intend to have it done by now? Yeah, I did. Did I do it? No, I didn't. So remember, intentions require action. Oh, October. So the new moon is kind of interesting. It's a partial solar eclipse, and there's some creators out there making a big deal out of it, but it really doesn't have a great amount of visibility, except like a little tip of New Zealand in through the South Pacific. So the South Pacific Islands need to be aware. And then across the northern part of Antarctica and the southern tip of Argentina and Chile, they're going to see it. I think we'll see. This to me says climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change. And it is part of why I have like a big ice melt for like December in the forecast. Could be an iceberg. Could be large amounts of precip in the southern hemisphere. Or just big storms in the southern hemisphere towards the solstice. So, yippee, could see some rising sea levels start in the southern hemisphere. I don't think it's a massive ice melt as far as like rising our sea level significantly globally, but it'll be measurable, and it's going to be yet another bellwether moment for climate change. And this partial solar eclipse kicks it off. I did a video about the president of Argentina on the TikTok a couple days ago because I had a birth time. That's exciting. If I don't have birth times, I can't make, accurate predictions, and I'm not going to put my reputation on the line to satisfy curiosity. That's just not going to happen. But anyway, President of Argentina, whose name I find difficult to pronounce, so I'm not going to say it, is going to be embattled in October. Not a great month for him. Trump is not going to have a great month either and could have a health crisis. I think he's already in one. I've been talking about that forever. Biden may have a major health crisis, and we may find out about that more towards the end of October. When we've talked about potential delays for the election, I've said it looks like it's the weather and infrastructure damage. And looking at where things are standing now, we may be seeing people asking for exceptions to get ballots in, okay, for the date. So get ready for that news to start hitting, especially after the first week of October. Because I think there's at least one storm, whether it's a big hurricane or not, could be a tropical depression, but it's going to carry a lot of water with it, and it looks like it's going to cycle dropping water. So there might be some winds, but it's not necessarily the hugest way. It could be. I don't know. But what I see for sure is a hell of a lot of water, levee or dam breaches. And this one, like I talked about it a little bit earlier in the podcast, the political fallout from this is going to be voter disenfranchisement. So we'll see what happens with this. Interestingly, the places that are getting hit by the weather tend to run red. So we may see some blame from the people to the political establishment, trying to claim gerrymandering or what have you from the Democrats and misusing a natural disaster. I don't think that's it at all. I think there's very bad communication. I think they'll deploy as much emergency management out as they can. But it's almost impossible to speak to the destruction in the moment because we don't even have any real numbers. So if a state has asked for emergency management funds, they are being allocated. That's the information I've seen. Okay, as much as they can. Other political fallout, I think we may get some news about King Charles. I want to call him. He's king now, Laurie. Just because you're old. That's a lifetime habit. So King Charles may have a health announcement later on in the month. This month's bingo card's going to be interesting, which it wasn't quite a blackout from September, but it was pretty full. It was pretty full. We'll see how October goes. I'll get the bingo card out on the 1st. So there's political fallout. And Kamala Harris is under a great deal of pressure. And I think this is coming from all sides. I want to remind you, she's vice president. So all the people are like, where has she been the last 3 years? Being vice president, doing her job. She wasn't the spokesperson for the executive branch. The vice president's job is to kind of stay out of the way of the president and say yes and go do things. It's a yes person position. They're not there to counter the president. They're there to back them up and preside over the Senate, period. Okay. But Biden may not be able to finish out this term. When I said she inherited the presidency, I wasn't talking about the nomination. I was talking about doing the actual job as president. And we may see that come to play by the end of the month. We shall see. I could be wrong. But she's under an inordinate amount of pressure. And I've already given that prediction in my Patreon in the Kamala Harris 44-minute presentation on her astrology going all the way through February of 2025. I'm going to repeat. I don't see Trump becoming president. I think it is potential by the end of this week Trump could have a major crisis. Now, this could be an accident, like a car or a plane accident, transportation accident, where he's injured. It could be, is it an assassination attempt? This one looks like more likely. What's interesting, he's going to be back in Butler, Pennsylvania on the 5th, which I find fascinating. And the astrology isn't necessarily great for him, but I see the biggest risk on the 6th, not the 5th. So it could be transportation. But J.D. Vance has something really similar as well. And I'm wondering, are they together and something happens? Are they at the same event and something happens? Are they in the same motorcade and something happens? I don't know. I don't know all the plans. But it looks like both of them have something going on as we move towards the end of the week. So be ready for news probably next Monday about Trump and Vance in some way, shape, or form. Again, it could be an accident. It could be some kind of health crisis, which to me, if it's both of them, it could be an accident. Or it could be both of them have things happen on different days because they have very similar chart layouts. Very similar. Different placements, similar chart layouts. Vance has a little better luck over the weekend than Trump does. But Trump's under increasing pressure as he goes through October, as Mars swings through his Cancer placements, and it's not all that greatly beneficial to him. So we shall see. We shall see what's going on. Again, I do not see either one of them becoming president. Matilda has some theories. And when I looked at the astrology of it, I thought, by gum, there's a possibility that a different candidate could get chosen by the GOP. That person does not have the transits to win presidency. But it's fascinating. So the theory is good. I'm not going to talk about it. I'll let her talk about that. But I have looked at the astrology and went, it's possible. It's not out of the realm of possibility. But I see Harris winning the presidency. It may not look logical as we move through October. She may be struggling a little bit. She's under a great deal of pressure. But I think Trump continues to undo himself, and I'm still not convinced he doesn't have a health crisis. I do not see him keeling over entirely. But that's hard to predict in astrology. So, he might have a health crisis. But I told you when all those mediums were like, he's going to die in September. Not Matilda didn't say that, but other techie-talkies. It's not in his astrology for that to happen. I don't see it. So just reminding you. Speaking of, no, the timeline didn't change. I know there is a somewhat famous medium who loves to talk about timeline changes. And they also like to claim they're a master astrologer. And I'm going to say, calling Master Bates, can you come to the counter, please? Because that's what I think of them as an astrologer. So, and all of those who got the joke, go ahead and laugh, because this is a tense episode. Inappropriate humor for the win. Hey, I was talking about those comments on Spotify. Before I get to the end of the segment, and where I talk more about how we can manage our stress levels during this time. Why don't we read through some of those? So before I move on to talking about how we deal with this in our mental health, let's read out some of the comments. Thank you, Laurie, and thank you to your patrons. Big blue heart. That's from Mel. Let's see. Denise says, oh my God, Leo rising here. I'm warm and nice, but like your mom, I personalize everything. Ha ha ha. Wow. Yeah, it's a thing. Josie Posey. Oh, that's cute. Josie Posey. Listen to this on my way to campus. Haven't been able to connect to the internet anywhere. Thank you, Patreon subscribers. Thank you, Josie Posey. Jenny Christine says, this tracks. Thanks, Laurie. And Jenny is a patron. This is from Chaos and Cookies, thanking patrons and saying, hello, I just want to take a moment to let you know how much I appreciate you, your time in your podcast, your calming presence and insightful discussions make each episode a true joy to listen to. Your ability to approach topics with such warmth and clarity is so calming. You have a gift. Many. Thank you for sharing. Thank you again. Thank you, Chaos and Cookies. Kim, hi, Laurie. I'm 21 years sober, and the first 40 minutes of this felt like the best meeting I've attended. That was the full moon in Pisces. The kind of people that see beyond the 12 steps or religious restrictions. Loved it and plan on listening to your sermon again. Oh, you're so welcome. And then this is from an anonymous user. Hey, thanks for the podcast. It's very helpful. Always have to listen to it twice since there's so much information. Saving up to be a Patreon. Thank you for your time. Thank you. And you guys can come in as a free patron as well. There are free options, but yeah. So these are just from a bunch of different episodes, but thank you for thanking the patrons. You can leave a comment on Spotify if you're a Spotify listener and help us get up in the charts on Spotify, because so many of you are now listening on Spotify. We dropped in the Apple charts, but because more people are listening on a different platform. Which, speaking of the Apple charts, Matilda was number 1 in the spirituality charts on Apple Podcasts. If you don't know who Matilda is, she's my cohort on the Sassy Seers podcast, and she does Beyond the Broomstick, which is a spirituality podcast. She is a professional medium and absolutely amazing. Very, very dear friend of mine. If you haven't checked out her podcast, please do, and send her a shout out as well. All right. I think it's time to talk about how we can make it through this very volatile month and do our mental health care, because we're all going to need it. There's just going to be a lot of stuff that comes down. And as much as we can physically prepare for bad weather, as much as we can, keep our eyes out, listen to our instincts and our intuition, how do we manage, especially if we're empaths, especially if we're sensitive? How do we manage our energy and our mental wellness? And so that's what we're going to talk about coming up next. All right. So how do we take care of our mental health during the month of October? Because a lot of us are going to be challenged. There are a lot of natural disasters, whether it's from storms, seismic activity, political violence, not just in the United States. Remember, we have a whole wide world, okay? We will see the conflict in the Middle East get expanded. And it will look like there is not an end in sight. It is so easy to lose hope in the extreme energy of October. And I'm going to say that's the last thing we want to let go of. The simple thing would be to say, in order to make an omelet, you have to break eggs. In order to make change, you have to move past resistance. And last month, in the September issue of the Awake Space Astrology magazine, I wrote an article about how to identify resistance and how to process through it and how to release it. In the face of tragedy, it is so easy to resist it. We don't want to see people suffer. We don't want to see people die. We don't want to see people starve to death. We don't want to see people get killed or bombed or brutalized. We don't. Of course we don't. If you have an ounce of empathy, it is hard to watch the struggle. And yet, as a collective, humanity is moving forward. It may not seem like it, but a lot of the problems that are up on deck did not start in 2016. They have existed for a very long time. Patriarchy has existed for thousands of years. Colonialization didn't just start when America was, invaded. Humans have always migrated, moved on to greener pastures, asserted dominance and control, and we claim it's our nature. I'll argue it is unchecked aggression, and it is learned behavior. We are very, very capable of learning better behaviors. And as somebody who is very neurospicy, very much so. In fact, when stressed, I go nonverbal. That's why I get quiet on social media when predictions come true that are very unpleasant. I had lots of meltdowns as a child when I was overstimulated. Today, I would have been easily diagnosed autistic in early childhood. Hyperverbal, learning to read it too, walking on my tiptoes, stimming, and again, under stress, going nonverbal. And a host of other things. But my mother made me have social skills. I went kicking and screaming. Some people call it masking. We live in a world where we have to deal with other people. And my mother knew full well that the world was not going to bend to my will, no matter how much I wanted it to. And trust me, I wanted it to. And I thank her for the skills she gave me. Now, some of it went a little bit overboard into social and cultural programming. No blame, that's what she knew. Be nice. Now she tells me, nah, you don't have to be nice. I was wrong about that. We can deconstruct, hold our mental health, and hold space for people. The one thing we need to do is learn when enough is enough and we need to take a break. Watching devastating reel or video or newscast after newscast can be deeply hope depriving. To see the bots out in force, and most of the real negative comments out there are bot farms. Pay attention, because you'll be able to tell the difference between a bot and a real human being being an asshole pretty easy once you see the pattern. There's psychological warfare going on in social media and in mainstream media to deprive us of hope, and it's been going on for decades. Because instead of showing the best of us, and I can guarantee you, social media, from a citizen's journalism point of view, is showing the best of us. People rescuing people in need, people showing up to clear roads, people rescuing animals. Those are the helpers. People showing up to feed people. And by the way, in the show notes, I have a link to a GoFundMe for East Tennessee, supplied to me by Leslie Braddock, who is running for House District number 12, which is in the area affected in Tennessee. And this is from a family that has served up many a plate. They own a restaurant to people in need. And this, she guarantees that this will get to the people who need it the most. I prefer direct donations, and I will only publish something I have a confirmation on that it's legitimate. Okay? So if you need something to do, donating to a legitimate fund that's going to directly impact the people in need is important. And beyond the moment, because it's going to take a long time to rebuild the community. That dinging sound was my mental health break, letting me know that the breakfast I have made for my dad was ready. And after I'm done recording this, I'll go make my mom's, because Mom doesn't like mushrooms. Cooking for people I love and feeding people is one of my stress reliefs. I understand how easy it is to get swallowed up by big feels, by big emotions, by the despair. And it is a defeating thing. I won't lie, over the last couple of days, I've bawled my eyes out on more than one occasion. I've questioned whether I have given strong enough warnings, whether I have given enough good advice, and have been haunted by multiple readings I had earlier in the year where I said, there's a dam breaking. Are you out of the way? And I hope to hear from that person. I happen to know they're probably helping in emergency management right now. There are people I know who live in the mountains. These are clients, these are patrons, and I don't know if they're all right, and I worry. Sometimes I don't even remember people's names, but man, I remember the reading. But if we lose hope, then there's nowhere else to go. Nihilism is not an intellectual strength. And when we look at the psychological warfare being thrown against those with empathy, to put the weight of the world on our shoulders till the point our knees buckle and we fall to the ground in despair, we let the bastards win. And the only people who show up are the sociopaths who don't give a shit about anybody. So what are we going to do? How are we going to manage through? Well, number one, feel the feelings. It's okay to have a good cry. It doesn't make you weak. It's a release. It's a release of tension. It's a release of energy. It's movement of energy. It's fine to cry. All right. Toxic masculinity and patriarchy is what dubbed certain emotions weak. We have Mars in Cancer. Let me tell you, when somebody with Mars in Cancer starts crying, you better run. Because it ain't good. And it don't make them weak. The next thing is reach out to someone to uplift them. Find someone doing something good and urge them on. Donate to things that help other people. Cook, clean, create, take breaks. It's okay. None of us are supposed to go 24/7. We weren't made for hustle and grind. We weren't made to go full speed every single day of the week. We all need to take a break sometime. And maybe after that good cry, you take a nap. Don't you remember that when you were little? If you had a hard day and you had a tantrum and you had a good cry and you felt that peace afterwards and you just conked out. Maybe you didn't, but maybe you have kids and you've seen them do it. That's okay. You could take a big soak in the tub or a shower and wash off the day. Go for a walk. Lift up someone else's spirits. Laugh. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to laugh if you're in the middle of the shit. It's okay. The more you can raise your own emotional state, the easier it is to make it through. I come from a family with a lot of gallows humor. My dad was one of the charter EMTs in the United States. He was in the first 5,000. He was a firefighter for 30 years. He wrote the National Fire Science Curriculum. And he saw a lot of ugly things. And back then they didn't have psychological support. And so he often over-disclosed. We heard a lot of gruesome things growing up. No blame. There were no tools back then. But one of the things I knew was things would be okay if my dad was cracking a joke, even if it seemed scary at the time, if there was something going on. But if Dad cracked a joke, we'd be all right. Sometimes it wasn't appropriate. A lot of times it wasn't appropriate. But if you got really serious, it was scary. It's okay to smile. Buy yourself some flowers. Make some flowers. Bake something. Have some emergency carbs on hand. And do your own preparation. Because we've got supply chain disruptions. And they're big ones. Because we will most likely see dock workers go on strike. And that strike may get ugly by the end of the month. And we could see a repeat of the dock wars from the 1930s. We may see ugly political violence. It's okay to turn away once in a while. It's okay to say, that's something I can't deal with right now. It's okay to have boundaries around what you will allow in. I know there's those who will say, oh, well, that's a privileged position. Yes, the hell it is. And I can tell you, as somebody who has lived through a lot of traumatic things and experienced a hell of a lot of life, I have never once begrudged someone from needing a break who didn't have to live with what I was living through. I might have been a little bit jealous that their life wasn't the same as mine in that moment, because I was wanting better days, but never once did I want anyone in the mud with me. And the people who want you in the mud with them aren't ever going to get out of it. And I say that very firmly. Because if you want to support people, you got to be able to pull them up. And you can't do that from a depleted space. So you got to do what you got to do. If it's a half hour or an hour or half a day or a whole day, where you turn your attention to something that enlivens you and gives you a moment of peace. Because holding on to your power is about understanding your limits, your limitations, what you can stomach and what you can't. Everybody has different jobs to do in life. Some are uplifters. Some are teachers. Some are great at rising up in the face of chaos and putting things into order. Other people are good at giving comfort. Others still are better at organizing other people. Some are good at encouraging. Some are good at making sure everything runs smoothly, and they're good at delegating or logistics. Not everybody can walk into a burning building like my dad did and pull people out. Some people are just good at calling 911 when they smell smoke. And that is no less important. Some of us give warnings and help people prepare for things that are mostly unavoidable. I had a scientist comment on one of my videos from June of 2024, where I talked about the impact of climate change and saying, hey, this isn't new. Scientists have been warning us for over 40 years. And they were like, I keep talking because hopefully they'll listen to you. They're not listening to us. I say, I listen to you. And people will be listening to climate scientists in 2025 because it will be unavoidable. Absolutely unavoidable. We're already seeing it now. The government didn't make the weather happen. If you see that crap, it's a conspiracy theory and it's bullshit. And it's funded by the petrochemical industry. Think about who would benefit from such misinformation. Nobody's going out to devastate communities because they want to win an election. It couldn't be worse timing for either party. And it isn't God striking people down for sinning. It is climate change, and it is the consequence of corporate greed. We need to put the blame firmly where it belongs. If you want to guard your mental health, it's okay to get angry. It's okay to go yell at the sky. It's okay to do anything except hurt somebody else. Take a nap. Be of service. Help in your local community. Make sure people are registered to vote. You don't have to tell them who to vote for. That's honestly nobody's business, but you can sure as heck make sure they're not disenfranchised. I found this book when I was in my mid-20s, and it was already an older book by Robert Fulghum. All I really needed to know I learned in kindergarten. And here are his list of things we learned, and I think it's a pretty good list. Number 1, share everything. 2, play fair. 3, don't hit people. 4, put things back where you found them. 5, clean up your own mess. 6, don't take things that aren't yours. 7, say you're sorry when you hurt someone. 8, wash your hands before you eat. 9, flush. 10, warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. 11, live a balanced life. Learn some and drink some and draw some and paint some and sing and dance and play and work every day some. 12, take a nap every afternoon. 13, when you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. 14, be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the styrofoam cup? The roots go down and the plant goes up and nobody really knows how or why, but we're all like that. 15, goldfish and hamster and white mice and even the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die. So do we. 16, and then remember the Dick and Jane books and the first worked you learned the biggest word of all, look. Everything you need to know is in there somewhere. The golden rule and the love and basic sanitation, ecology and politics, and equality and sane living. Think what a better world it would be if the whole world had cookies and milk about 3 o'clock every afternoon, and they then lay down with our blankies for a nap. Or if all governments had a basic policy to always put things back where they found them and to clean up their own mess. And it is still true, no matter how old you are, when you go out into the world, it is best to hold hands and stick together. That's how we stay sane, make art, make music. Listen to Stevie Nicks' latest song. Stand up in your power. Refuse to be bent to your knees. And be hopeful. Look for the helpers. Take a break when you need to and come back to it. That's what those afternoon naps are for. And if you're lactose intolerant and you can't have gluten, guess what? There's almond flour cookies and almond milk. Look for the joy. My mother has been decorating our place for Halloween, and it's gorgeous. My mother gets the cutest decorations, and she makes things wonderful. And I learned that from her. And I said, well, you love it and it keeps you busy. And she said, no, that's not why I do it. It brings people joy. And there's not enough joy in the world, Laurie. What a Leo rising thing to do. I want to bring joy because I need to feel joy. I'm going to bring it. I want you to think about what you need to feel enlivened and then put it out into the world, because you can't expect to find it if you're not giving it. Give it and give it to yourself. And when you make yourself feel that joy, that sense of awe, that sense of wonder, that sense of love, you spread it out into the world. It's okay to be intense. It's okay to be passionate. It's okay to care so damn much it hurts. Don't tone yourself down. But remember, there's a time and a place. I'm a really intense person. And I know I am. And sometimes I get really worked up, especially if the energy is building, because I tend to process things a couple weeks before they hit. And sometimes when I'm talking to Matilda, I'm really worked up and she'll say, Laurie, I'm going to ask you just a little bit, bring it down just a little bit, because she's very sensitive. And I'm never offended. She's not asking me not to feel. She's saying, you're broadcasting your intensity, and I turn it around and I bring it into compassion. I'm not toning myself down. That's when I'm spilling it out in my frustration, and she's feeling that frustration. It can be painful on the other side because I'm feeling pain on the inside and it's spreading out. And when I realize it's a little much for somebody, I'm like, oh, okay. That's called being considerate. She's never mean when she says it. She's just like, please, I'm a little raw today. I'm a little tired today. I had a hard reading today. And of course, I change it on a dime. I say, oh, good. I was going down the rabbit hole and I was getting too sucked into all the ugly feelings that aren't helpful. And so we look at all the good things that happened that day. I do that with my best friend Kirsten as well. When we're feeling overwhelmed by the weight of the world, we look for the good stuff. Whether it's something wonderful her grandson Emmett has done, or me telling stories about what my daughter and I are up to, or a shopping trip I've had with my mom, or cooking with my dad. Because it's okay to enjoy the little things, even in the face of ugliness. And if we don't do that, then the oppressors win, because they want you to focus on devastation. Why do you think the oppressors are devoiding people of hope? It isn't just bombs. It's psychological warfare. And it's cruel. And we can't allow that cruelty to overwhelm us. So, help somebody else. Get your mind off of the despair. Go play a game. Take a walk. Go volunteer. There's a lot of stuff that communities need. Go talk to the food pantry, because supply chain might affect them. What do they need? Help your neighbor. Say hi to a stranger in a store. Just smile at somebody. The other day we were coming back from a shopping trip, and it was a long trip, and Mom's windshield was covered with bugs. And neither one of us could really reach those windows without a step stool. But right there at the gas station, this old gentleman looked at my tiny little mama as she got out to fill up the van with gas and said, well, ma'am, I'll wash your window for you. It looks like you ran into some bugs. My mother didn't know him. Just a stranger seeing a tiny little lady with a tall van. And he took the time. And when she got out to do something that she'd forgotten to do, before we left, he said, oh, ma'am, did I smudge it? Mom said, oh, no, it's perfect. It was the nicest gesture. It was something small and meaningful. You don't have to do big things to make a big difference. And I want to leave you with that. Being of service is often the best way to find hope.